Well, good morning. It is Friday here in California, about 7 a.m. I live in Santa Cruz. I drove up to NCS to meet with some guys. Looking forward to it up here in San Francisco. It's an early morning, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to share with these guys. And something that's come to mind are a few profound stories that I've heard about George Washington. So, I wasn't there. I don't know if any of these stories are true. But they've impacted me radically. And so, George Washington seems to be a pretty complicated guy. On one hand, there's some pretty dark things about the way he operated. And then on the other hand, he was this revolutionary that is profound. What he did that was good. On the good side, you have this guy that actually thought he couldn't die. Apparently he had some mystical type experiences that caused him to believe he just simply could not die. He would do crazy things, like he would take his horse up on a bluff where, just unload their guns on him, and its bullet holes closed. It never actually hit him. And it's also been said that, the England gave up because they literally thought George Washington. That's a powerful story. On the other side, hey, war is war. But one thing that he did that was interesting was a couple things that stood out to me. He told his men, shoot all of the guys in charge on the other side of the line. Now that was, you didn't aim for the guys in charge and whatever they were, the captains or the generals, or you didn't shoot those guys. That was a no-no. And George Washington said, I don't care what the rules are. Kill them all. So only shoot them. Only aim for them. So he kind of changed the rules of war and instituted a more aggressive, thing. That's one thing, but he also told his men, if you ever run away, I'll shoot you in the back and I will bury you and never tell your family where you're at. And that's a pretty intense thing. I get, hey, treason, I get it, but you have this kind of complicated man, a man that thinks he can't die. Potentially the England army gave up because they thought he couldn't die. A man that kind of changed the rules of engagement with war, threatened to kill his own men and bury them. Interesting stuff. Another really powerful story is when they are all in the room. I guess it's the 13 colonies that I represent, and they're about ready to decide on the whole founding our country. And a few guys leave the room. They're like, we're done. We've had it. And Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson are in there, and George Washington's quiet the whole time. People are like, hey, speak, George. You're the leader. And George won't say anything. And a few guys leave, and a couple other guys are threatening to leave, and that basically would have ended it, because they wouldn't have had the majority. George Washington stands up, slams his fist on the table, and yells, sign the damn paper, it's good enough. And went and grabbed the guys, and basically that's when all the guys signed the paper, because George Washington stood up and just said, this is the way it is. Another interesting thing is they all wanted him to be king, and he absolutely refused to be king. He knew that it was we've fled from was the tyranny, and he refused to be a part of it. And here's some of the darkness that really is interesting to me. This is not a bad thing, but it just shows where he was at. Before he went into So I got to say, but he was so concerned about his personal brand, the way people saw him, that he would never go into a town unless he had new, fresh clothes to change into, because he wanted people to think of him so highly. And then comes the strangest part of the stories that I've heard. Apparently he lied in his journals. Here's the context. There was a time when he and his men came upon some Native Americans, and they murdered every single one of them. Now, they saw Native Americans like we see the Taliban, right? Like they were they didn't think of them as like, you know, it's their land. They thought of them as like these barbaric, murderous people. And although wrong, that was their mentality when they did what they did. What's interesting is that George Washington's men would write down things like, all of his men, they had journals. They would write down things like, we came upon these, you know, these Indians, and we slaughtered every one of them in their sleep. And we took all their stuff. But George Washington would write about how all of me and all my men we were sleeping. And these Indians came upon us, and they tried to ambush us, and we woke up just in time, and not a single man was lost. We defended ourselves. And I just have had this interesting thought about leadership. You can start a nation. You can have the loudest voice in the room. You can even not be killed. You can do all these things right, but you can still threaten your men and tell them, I'll kill you and bury you, and not tell your family where you're at. And you can still be so concerned about your self-image that you always have extra clothes to always make yourself appear as good as possible. And you can even lie in your journals because you know that you're the leader and people will eventually read your journals, not your men's. And it just really got me thinking, since I heard these stories, about the need to be self-aware and think more about, you know, is my self-image that important? Is it worth being a tyrant? Is it worth being unsafe and scary and demanding just to get something done? Or can I lead better? And I honor George Washington for all that he did. And obviously every person, every man, woman, every leader is complicated. There's a tension between doing things for the right reasons and struggling. Anyway, I'm going to meet with these guys. I'll probably share those stories, so I thought I'd practice here on YouTube. Have an awesome day. I'm loving you right now.